You know what they say about volunteering for things? Don't. Ever. Because one minute you're fixing a busted hyperdrive on some backwater mining station, and the next minute you're sitting in the Galactic Council chambers being told you're humanity's greatest hope. Yeah, that's me. Captain Jake Morrison, former veterinarian, current space medic, and apparently the galaxy's last resort. The council chamber looked like someone had stuffed every alien stereotype into a blender and hit frap. Blue-skinned diplomats with too many eyes, tentacled beings that communicated through color changes, and at least 3 species that I was pretty sure were just rocks with attitude problems. They all turned to stare at me like I'd just walked into their grandmother's funeral wearing a clown suit. Captain Morrison, announced Ambassador Grex, whose species looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a tax auditor. We have summoned you here regarding a matter of utmost galactic importance. I leaned back in my chair, which was clearly designed for someone with 4 legs and a tail. Let me guess. Someone's pet is sick, and you need the human to fix it, because we're apparently the universe's janitors now. The color-changing squid alien went from diplomatic blue to offended purple. This is no mere pet human. Queen Zara'thul's sacred companion beast is dying. Every healer, every medical expert from 17 different worlds has attempted treatment. All have failed. And now you want me to take a crack at it. I rub my temples. What makes you think a guy who used to give shots to cranky farm animals is going to succeed where your fancy alien doctors failed? Ambassador Grex's mandibles clicked in what I'd learned was either amusement or the alien equivalent of gritting your teeth. Because, Captain Morrison, humans have a rather unique reputation for solving problems in ways that others find unorthodox. You mean stupid. I prefer the term creatively reckless. The rock creature spoke up, its voice like gravel in a cement mixer. The Queen's beast has been companion to her line for 7 centuries. Should it perish under her rule, the Vorthan Empire will consider it an omen of weakness. War fleets are already mobilizing. Great, just great. So no pressure or anything. Let me get this straight. If I can't save some alien pet, we're looking at interstellar war. Precisely. I stood up, mostly because the chair was giving me a wedgie. Well, when you put it like that, how can I possibly refuse? Though I should mention my success rate with exotic animals is roughly 50-50. And that's including the time I accidentally cured a space hamster's hiccups. The assembled aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey both desperation and regret. Ambassador Grex leaned forward. Captain Morrison, you are our final option. The Queen has agreed to receive you, though she is skeptical of human capabilities. Smart woman. When do I leave? Immediately. The beast's condition deteriorates by the hour. As I headed for the exit, I couldn't help but marvel at how my life had gone so spectacularly off the rails. 5 years ago, I was treating cows with stomach problems. Now I was apparently the galaxy's last hope for preventing an interstellar war by playing doctor to some alien's dying companion. The universe, I decided, had a really twisted sense of humor. Queen Zara'thul's palace looked like what would happen if someone gave a crystal chandelier delusions of grandeur and unlimited construction funds. Everything sparkled, gleamed, or glowed with an intensity that made my retinas file a formal complaint. The corridors were wide enough to fly a shuttle through, which seemed excessive unless you were compensating for something. My escort was a nervous little guy named Pip, who looked like someone had stretched a ferret into humanoid shape and dressed it in formal robes. He kept wringing his hands and making worried, chittering sounds as we walked. The Queen is most distressed about Grex's condition, Pip informed me for the 15th time. Perhaps you could be more respectful in your examination than your reputation suggests. What reputation? The one where you told the Centaurian ambassador that his digestive problems were probably caused by having a stick permanently lodged in his posterior. Hey, I was technically correct. Those guys need more fiber in their diet. We entered the Queen's private chambers, and I had to admit, the woman knew how to make an entrance. Queen Zara'thul was tall, elegant, and had the kind of bearing that suggested she could order your execution and make you thank her for it. Her skin had a faint luminescent quality, and her eyes were the color of deep space, which would have been intimidating if she hadn't looked so desperately worried. But it was her companion that really caught my attention. "Holy Mother of Genetic Accidents," I muttered, staring at the creature sprawled on an elaborate cushioned platform. What exactly am I looking at here? Grex looked like what would happen if a disco ball had gotten frisky with a rhinoceros, then decided to cosplay as a pile of very expensive jewelry. His hide was covered in what appeared to be natural crystal formations that caught the light and threw it around the room in dazzling patterns. He was roughly the size of a small horse, but built like a tank with legs. "Grex is a Luminar beast," the Queen said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made solar systems pay attention. "His kind bonds with our royal bloodline. When a Luminar dies, it is often seen as a sign that the ruler's time has ended." "No pressure," I muttered, approaching the apparently dying disco rhino. "What are his symptoms?" "He has not eaten in 12 days. He barely moves. Our healers say his life force is fading, but they cannot determine why." Pip practically vibrated with anxiety as I knelt beside Grex. "Captain Morrison, please be careful. Grex is sacred to our people. He must not be disturbed unnecessarily." I ignored Pip and started my examination. Grex's eyes tracked my movement, and while he looked tired, he didn't look sick. His breathing was steady, his temperature seemed normal, and when I gently pressed on his side, he responded normally to the touch. "Has he shown any interest in anything lately?" I asked. "Toys, food, activities he used to enjoy?" The Queen frowned. "Grex does not play with toys, Captain. He is a noble companion, not a common pet." "Right. What about social interaction? Does he spend time with other Luminar beasts?" "There are no others in the palace. Grex is unique." I sat back on my heels, pieces clicking together in my head. "Your Majesty, I don't think Grex is physically sick." Pip made a strangled sound. "Captain Morrison, 17 of the galaxy's finest healers have examined Grex. Surely you cannot diagnose him in mere minutes? Watch me." I stood up and faced the Queen. "When was the last time Grex left this palace? He does not leave. It would be inappropriate for a sacred companion to mingle with common creatures. When was the last time he interacted with anyone besides you and your staff?" The Queen's expression grew colder. "Grex requires no other companionship. I provide everything he needs. Your Majesty, with all due respect, I think Grex is dying of loneliness." The silence that followed my diagnosis was so complete I could hear the crystal formations on the walls humming in harmony. Queen Zara'thul stared at me like I'd just suggested her sacred companion needed a career change and a motorcycle. "Loneliness," she repeated, her voice flat enough to use as a landing pad. "Yeah, depression, actually. I've seen it before." I gestured toward Grex, who was watching our conversation with what I was pretty sure was interest. "Look at him. He's not sick, he's miserable. When was the last time he had an adventure? Made a friend? Did anything besides lie around this palace looking decorative?" Pip made a sound like a tea kettle having an existential crisis. "Captain Morrison, you cannot be serious. Grex lives in the finest palace in the galaxy. He wants for nothing, except a life worth living." The Queen's luminescent skin flickered with what I was learning to recognize as barely controlled anger. "You dare suggest that my care is inadequate? I'm suggesting that love and imprisonment sometimes look pretty similar from the inside." I'd had this conversation before, back on Earth, with well-meaning pet owners who couldn't understand why their pampered, isolated animals were miserable. "Your Majesty, can I tell you about a dog I once treated?" "This is hardly the time for Earth animal stories," Pip protested. "Actually, it's exactly the time." I settled into what my ex-wife used to call my stubborn veterinarian pose. There was this wealthy family who had a beautiful golden retriever named Max. Max lived in a mansion, ate gourmet food, had a personal groomer, the works. But Max was dying, just like Grex. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, just lay around looking miserable. The Queen's expression suggested she was considering whether having me executed would be worth the diplomatic incident. The family was convinced Max was sick. Brought him to every specialist in the state. But you know what was wrong with Max? Dalen. D. He was bored out of his mind. He'd never been allowed to run free, never played with other dogs, never got to be an actual dog instead of a living decoration. Grex is not a dog, the Queen said icily. No, but he's a living creature who's been turned into a beautiful, lonely symbol. Look at him, Your Majesty. Really look at him. We all turned to Grex, who was indeed watching us with what seemed like keen attention. His crystal formations were catching the light differently now, creating patterns that almost looked like he was trying to communicate. What did you do about the dog? The Queen asked quietly. I prescribed the most dangerous treatment known to overprotective pet owners. I told them to let Max be a dog. Take him to the park, let him run, let him get dirty, let him make friends. They thought I was insane. Were you? Were you? Probably. But it worked. Within a week, Max was eating again. Within a month, he was the happiest dog I'd ever seen. He lived another 8 years, and spent every one of them actually living instead of just existing. Pip looked like he was about to faint. You cannot possibly be suggesting that we allow Grex to cavort with common beasts. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Grex needs friends, exercise, adventures, and probably a good role in whatever passes for mud on this planet. He needs to remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just being a pretty ornament. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, studying her companion. The healer said his life force is fading. Because it is. But not from disease. From boredom, isolation, and depression. Your Majesty, you love Grex, right? More than my own life. Then you need to let him live his. Getting Queen Zara'thul to agree to my treatment plan was like convincing a helicopter parent to let their kid ride a bicycle without training wheels, knee pads, and a full medical team on standby. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and the Queen was definitely desperate. This is highly irregular, Pip muttered as we prepared for Grex's first therapeutic outing. The little guy had appointed himself as supervisor of my unorthodox treatment, which meant he spent most of his time wringing his hands and predicting doom. Irregular is my specialty, I replied, checking the harness I'd rigged for Grex. The Luminar beast seemed more alert already, his crystal formations practically humming with anticipation. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Grex could be injured, kidnapped, or corrupted by exposure to common creatures. The Queen could have us both executed. We could start an interstellar war. You're really a glass-half-empty kind of guy. Aren't you, Pip? Our first stop was the Palace Gardens, where I figured Grex could get used to being outside without straying too far from familiar territory. The moment we stepped onto the crystalline pathways, Grex transformed. His head came up, his step quickened, and those disco ball hide patterns started shifting in what I was pretty sure was excitement. He's never been in the gardens? I asked. Well, no, Pip admitted. The Queen felt it was too risky. What if he damaged the rare flowers? What if he frightened the gardeners? What if he actually enjoyed himself? I shot back, watching Grex investigate a fountain with the enthusiasm of a kid discovering ice cream. Within an hour, we'd attracted an audience. Palace workers gathered at a respectful distance, watching in amazement as the legendary Grex sniffed flowers, chased floating seed pods, and generally acted like a normal, curious creature, instead of a sacred relic. The gardeners seemed fascinated, I observed. Pip nodded reluctantly. They have never seen Grex so animated. Just wait until tomorrow. The next day I convinced Pip to let us venture beyond the palace walls. This required negotiations that would have impressed a diplomat, 3 different security briefings, and a formal written request that I was pretty sure Pip intended to use as evidence at my trial. The capital city of the Vorthan Empire was a marvel of crystal architecture and flowing water features, but what really caught my attention were the locals. The Vorthans were similar to their queen in basic structure, but they came in a wider variety of colors and sizes. And they all stopped what they were doing to stare as we walked past with Grex. Is that really the Queen's companion? Whispered a shopkeeper. He's magnificent, breathed a small child who clearly hadn't gotten the memo about maintaining respectful distance. Grex, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He investigated market stalls, sniffed interesting smells, and when a group of local children worked up the courage to approach, he actually let them pet his crystal formations. The kids giggled as the crystals chimed softly under their touch. This is highly inappropriate, Pip muttered, but I noticed he was smiling. This is therapy, I corrected. Look at him, Pip. When was the last time you saw Grex this happy? The breakthrough came on our third outing, when we encountered a flock of what the locals called shimmer birds, basically space pigeons with iridescent feathers. Grex took one look at these birds and apparently decided they needed chasing. What followed was the most undignified, joyful, ridiculous chase scene in Vorthan royal history. Grex bounded through the market square, crystal formations flashing as he pursued birds that were clearly enjoying the game as much as he was. Vendors laughed, children cheered, and even the normally staid city guards cracked smiles. Captain Morrison, Pip said weakly, the Queen is going to have us both fed to the ceremonial pit creatures. The Queen, said a familiar voice behind us, is going to do no such thing. We turned to find Queen Zara'thul herself, dressed in a simple cloak and clearly trying to blend in with the crowd. She'd been following us, I realized, watching her companion's transformation. Your Majesty, Pip squeaked, I can explain. But the Queen wasn't looking at us. She was watching Grex, who had given up chasing birds and was now playing some kind of game with a group of local children. Her expression was a mixture of wonder, joy, and something that might have been regret. I have never seen him so alive, she said quietly. That's because he finally is alive, I replied. Your Majesty, you didn't fail Grex. You loved him so much that you forgot love sometimes means letting go. The Queen nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving her companion. He is happy. Is happy. He's ecstatic. And more importantly, he's healthy. His appetite came back yesterday, didn't it? Yes. He has been eating with enthusiasm I have not seen in months. Because he's got something to live for again. Adventure, friendship, new experiences. All the things that make life worth living. As if to emphasize my point, Grex bounded over to us, his crystal formations chiming with pure joy. He nuzzled the Queen affectionately, then turned to the children and chimed again, clearly inviting them to continue their game. I believe, the Queen said softly, that we need to make some changes to palace life. The confrontation I'd been expecting finally came 3 days later, but not in the way I'd anticipated. Instead of royal guards dragging me to a dungeon, Queen Zara'thul requested a private meeting in her chambers. Grex was there too, looking healthier and more vibrant than I'd ever seen him. Captain Morrison, the Queen began, and I braced myself for the royal equivalent of being fired. I owe you an apology. That wasn't what I'd expected. Your Majesty? I have been watching you treat Grex for the past several days. More importantly, I have been watching Grex respond to your treatment. I have seen him more alive and joyful in these few days than he has been in years. She moved to Grex's side, running her hand along his crystal formations. They chimed softly at her touch, but I could see the difference. Where before they'd been dull and lifeless, now they resonated with vibrant energy. I thought I was protecting him, she continued. I thought that by keeping him safe, by giving him everything I believed he needed, I was showing my love. Instead, I was slowly killing him. Your Majesty, you weren't trying to hurt him. You were scared of losing him. Yes, my grandmother's companion died when she was young, and many said it was because she was too permissive, too willing to let him roam freely. When I bonded with Grex, I swore I would never make that mistake. She turned to face me, and I could see tears in those deep space eyes. Instead, I made a different mistake. I confused love with control, protection with imprisonment. I nearly killed the creature I love most in this galaxy because I was too afraid to let him live. Pip, who had been standing silently in the corner, stepped forward. Your Majesty, you acted out of love. No one could fault you for that. Grex could fault me for it. And he did, didn't he? By refusing to eat, refusing to engage, slowly fading away. He was trying to tell me something, and I was too blind to see it. I watched Grex during this conversation, and the big guy seemed to understand what was being discussed. He moved closer to the Queen, his crystal formations shifting to create a warm, comforting glow. The question is, the Queen said, what do we do now? I cannot simply release Grex into the wild. He is bonded to my family line, and the political implications. Undone. We don't need to release him, I interrupted. We just need to give him a life worth living. Regular outings, social interaction, new experiences. Think of it as expanding his world instead of replacing it. But the security concerns, the protocols. Your Majesty, with respect, Grex just spent 3 days wandering around your capital city. Did anything terrible happen? Did he get hurt, kidnapped, or corrupted by common creatures? The Queen smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. No, he made friends. Exactly. Look, you don't have to change everything overnight. Start small. Daily walks in the city, supervised playtime with other creatures, maybe some kind of enrichment activities here in the palace. Pip cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, might I suggest we formalize Captain Morrison's recommendations? Perhaps establish a new position. A companion wellness coordinator? An excellent idea, Pip. Captain Morrison, would you be willing to help us develop these new protocols? I looked at Grex, who was now investigating a potted plant with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for scientific discoveries. The change in him was remarkable, from a dying, depressed creature to a vibrant, curious being who was clearly enjoying every moment of his newfound freedom. Your Majesty, I'd be honored. But I have one condition. The Queen raised an eyebrow. Name it. Pip gets to be the companion wellness coordinator. He's been watching everything I do, asking all the right questions, and despite his worrying, he genuinely cares about Grex's well-being. Plus, he's already house-trained, which is more than I can say for most of my assistants. Pip looked like someone had just told him he'd won the Galactic Lottery. Captain Morrison, that is, Your Majesty, I would be deeply honored to serve in such a capacity. Then it settled. The Queen moved to a formal desk and began drafting what looked like an official decree. From this day forward, the royal protocols regarding companion care will be revised to prioritize the well-being and happiness of our bonded creatures. Pip will oversee these new initiatives, with Captain Morrison serving as a consulting advisor. As she wrote, Grex wandered over to me and bumped his massive head against my shoulder. His crystal formations chimed in what I was learning to recognize as contentment. You're welcome, big guy, I said, scratching behind what I hoped were his ears. Just remember this when you're famous for being the happiest royal companion in galactic history. The Queen looked up from her writing. Captain Morrison, there is one more thing. The Galactic Council should be informed that the crisis has been resolved. I believe they were rather concerned about the potential for diplomatic complications. Yeah, about that. Your Majesty, you might want to mention that the solution came from letting Grex be happy instead of just keeping him safe. Other species might benefit from that particular insight. An excellent point. Perhaps we should establish some kind of interspecies companion care exchange program. I grinned. Your Majesty, I think you're going to be a natural at this whole letting creatures actually live their lives thing. 3 months later, I was sitting in the palace gardens watching Grex play fetch with a group of local children, while Pip took notes on socialization techniques. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Where once there had been a dying, depressed creature, now there was a vibrant, joyful being who seemed to find wonder in everything from chasing shimmer birds to investigating new smells in the market. His energy levels have increased by approximately 300%, Pip reported, consulting his carefully maintained charts. His appetite is excellent. His social engagement is off the charts, and his crystal formations now produce 17 different harmonic patterns compared to the previous 3. Translation, he's happy, I said, watching Grex gently play tug-of-war with a rope toy. The sight of a legendary royal companion engaged in such mundane fun still made palace visitors do double takes. Queen Zara'thul approached from the palace, carrying what appeared to be official correspondence. She'd changed over the past 3 months too, becoming less imperious and more approachable. Turned out that when you're not constantly worried about your dying companion, you have more energy for actually enjoying life. Captain Morrison, I have interesting news, she announced. The Galactic Council has been receiving requests from other worlds regarding your companion therapy techniques. Apparently, word has spread about Grex's recovery. Oh, great. Let me guess, everyone wants the crazy human to fix their pets too. Actually, they want to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth specifically to access human expertise in interspecies psychology. You've apparently created an entirely new field of study. I nearly choked on my drink. I've done what now? Pip looked up from his notes, practically glowing with pride. Captain Morrison, you are now officially recognized as the galaxy's first interspecies therapist. We've received consultation requests from 12 different worlds, including one involving a crystalline emperor whose bonded mineral formations have gone dormant. Bonded mineral formations. Right. Because my life wasn't weird enough already. The Queen smiled. There's more. The Council has approved the establishment of the Morrison Institute for Interspecies Companion Wellness to be located here on Vorthas Prime. You would serve as director, with Pip as your deputy director. Wait, they're naming an institute after me? Based on the fact that I told one alien to let her pet have friends? You saved Grex's life, the Queen said simply. More than that, you taught us that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. That lesson has implications far beyond companion care. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Grex bounded over to us, his crystal formations chiming happily. He'd been playing in what passed for mud on Vorthas Prime, and he looked absolutely delighted with himself. 3 months ago, such a sight would have horrified everyone present. Now it was just Tuesday. Look at him, I said, scratching Grex behind his crystal-encrusted ears. 3 months ago he was dying because he was too isolated and protected. Now he's thriving because he gets to be himself instead of just being a symbol. The irony, the Queen observed, is that he's become a more powerful symbol than ever. Citizens throughout the Empire have been inspired by his transformation. There's been a noticeable increase in people allowing their companions more freedom, more social interaction. And the political implications? Overwhelmingly positive. The people see Grex's happiness as a sign of strong, confident leadership. Turns out that a queen secure enough to let her companion play in the mud is seen as someone who doesn't need to control everything to prove her power. A chiming sound from my communicator interrupted our conversation. Pip consulted his datapad and grimaced. Captain Morrison, your first official consultation request is here. Already? What's the problem this time? A Centaurian merchant family, whose bonded crystal garden has apparently become aggressive. It's been launching decorative stones at visitors and refusing to photosynthesize. I stared at him. Aggressive. Crystal garden. The family is quite distressed. They say it used to be very peaceful and decorative, but now it seems actively hostile to anyone except the youngest family member. Let me guess, the youngest family member is the only one who actually talks to it instead of just expecting it to sit there and look pretty. Pip nodded admiringly. Your diagnostic skills are truly remarkable, Captain Morrison. Queen Zara'thul laughed, a sound that had become much more common in recent months. Captain, I believe you're about to discover that every species in the galaxy has been making the same mistake we were making with Grex. What's that? Confusing love with control, and thinking that keeping something safe means keeping it from actually living. I watched Grex chase after a particularly elusive shimmer bird, his crystal formations flashing with pure joy. 3 months ago, this magnificent creature had been dying of loneliness in the most beautiful prison in the galaxy. Now he was living his best life, and in the process he'd helped an entire empire learn the difference between protection and imprisonment. You know what? I said, standing up and brushing palace garden dirt off my clothes. Maybe fixing the galaxy's relationship issues wasn't such a bad career move after all. As we headed back toward the palace to meet my next impossible case, I couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. I'd started this journey as humanity's last-ditch representative, expected to fail spectacularly at saving an alien pet. Instead, I'd accidentally become the galaxy's first interspecies therapist, founded an institute, and learned that the universal cure for depression, whether you're human, alien, or a disco ball rhinoceros, is pretty much the same: friends, freedom, and the chance to actually live your life instead of just existing through it. The universe, I decided, still had a twisted sense of humor. But at least now it was funny in a good way. Behind us, Grex's joyful chiming echoed through the palace gardens, a sound that had become the unofficial anthem of the new normal. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better soundtrack for saving the galaxy, one lonely creature at a time.